Greetings, and welcome to another episode of I Survived Youth Group in the 90s. I'm your host, Scott, and with me, as always, is my accomplished co-host, Caleb. Caleb, what's going on?
What have I accomplished?
You know what? You're right.
We literally get to it later in this episode that my 18-year-old self is ashamed in comparison to our guest. So, not accomplished probably is a better description of me.
You know what they say, though? Comparison is the thief of joy. So you do you.
Ooh.
You've accomplished a lot.
That is deep for an intro.
I think that's what they say, and if they didn't, that's what I say.
We need to coin that phrase. Yes.
That's right. Well, we are back to talk about the experience growing up as youth group kids in the 90s and how that has shaped our adult lives. We'll talk to old and new friends about their faith journeys spanning from the 90s to today and discuss current cultural topics through the lens of someone who grew up during that era. Caleb, tell us, who is our guest today?
Joined by AJ, a great guy that I've gotten to know talking music online. He's been on my music show a number of times. He actually helped me the little Patreon thing that I do, where it's called Go Talk to Your Internet Friends. That was his idea, where I just grab one of my internet friends, and we talk about a random topic on, it's usually music related. I've only done a couple episodes, but that was his idea. So AJ, I was excited to get him on the show and excited to reach out and have him on the show. So AJ joined us here on this Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, it was great to talk to him. I'd seen his interacting with a little bit online, and he seemed like a really, down-to-earth guy, and very much so. Really generous guy, especially with his stories about his experience. But to be clear up front, definitely not your traditional youth group experience.
Yeah, it was our first interaction with somebody who is of the Western branch of American Reformed Presbyterianism, and I thought it was a really good interaction.
Tell us what that is. So
the joke of that is what the Simpsons Church is called, and that's kind of AJ's experience. It's meant to be a play on like somebody who's got like it's meant to be a denomination that kind of mashes together all of these Protestant things and kind of makes this generic religion or denomination for the church. And yeah, hearing what AJ did and kind of the multi-layered different things that he was involved with it made me think of that by the end of the episode. So that's why including it here. But yeah, he was just so many different things that I was involved in this for a little bit and this for a little bit and this for a little bit is very, very not your traditional story. And I don't think anything we haven't heard anything close to that. Pam is probably the closest one where she had a little bit of movement throughout different youth groups. But this was like just all over the place and pretty interesting to hear.
Yeah, super fun to kind of listen to where he was, because at many points you're like, what? Why now? Yeah. Why did you go there now? Like, okay. So you'll have to enjoy that yourself, as you listen through. But it really has influenced and informed who he is as an adult. And, we kind of talk about that in the context of where he's at today, the church that's kind of trying to go to today, and then his what he likes on the music side today as well, because you guys connected a lot about music, and I know you guys guested back and forth on shows about music too. So it was really fun to link all those things together.
Yep, yeah, really a bit of a brilliant guy in my opinion too. And he, if you end up enjoying his conversation, I'll pitch it now just because it's going to be in the outro too. But like he's got a really interesting political podcast that you might be interested in. It's called Crashing the Political Party, and it's an interesting look at politics and third-party politics. So that kind of also gives you a little flavor. He doesn't go into any of that. He really, that was the other kind of really interesting thing, is that he really divorced himself from that, because it'd be really easy for him to swing into a political conversation, but he really just kind of focused on his journey. But if you enjoy hearing from him, I'll pitch it now, and then I'll pitch it at the end too, because it's another interesting it's another interesting podcast that you can check out. We've kind of framed a lot of these as the CCM Twitter related podcasts, and it's one more on the docket that you can go check out.
AJ's going to be pissed because he said before we started recording, like, you don't have to plug my stuff.
Yeah,
and here we are plugging his stuff without him even here. So
yeah,
it's
sorry, worth a plug in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, AJ, thank you very much for joining us, and it was great to get to talk with you and hear your experience. And of course, thank you to you, the listener, for listening to this episode. We hope that you enjoy.
I want to break in and quickly remind everyone that the views and opinions expressed on this episode of I Survived Youth Group in the 90s may not be held by or even approved of by everyone appearing on this episode. One of the goals of this show is to give everyone a safe space to share their opinions and thoughts on deeply personal matters of faith. We are not looking to start an argument, but instead we want to let people share how they feel. During our interviews and discussions, we may not represent every point of view on a given subject, and we understand that this may be frustrating at times, but it is the nature of a podcast discussion with a limited amount of time. We also know and want to acknowledge that our memories of events that happened 25 to 30 years ago may not be 100% accurate. We assume everyone's best intentions as they share how they remember the experience of their youth. Now, back to the show.
Hey everyone, we are joined today by AJ. AJ's joined us as a new friend of the podcast. AJ, thanks for jumping on. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, welcome. Well, you may have heard the show a little bit. We want to get your story of your journey and see kind of where you've been and where you're at now. Tell us, let's start from the beginning. How did you grow up in the 90s? What is a Christian home environment? And kind of about when were you attending youth?
Sure. So I would describe it as moderately Christian. So we went to church up until between like third and fourth grade when we moved, and lived in a lot of different small towns, and so we ended up usually at whatever church was in a small town. My sister was baptized in a Lutheran church. I was baptized in a Methodist one. Why? Small town church. That's what was there.
Okay.
Spent a few years at a Church of Christ, and going to that, most Sundays, most Wednesdays if schedules could accommodate it. But, church on Sunday, Simpsons in the evening, Sunday night, Petra on the radio, followed up by like Leonard Skinner. So nice. It was a typical like 90s experience, I think, where it was just kind of like, moderately Christian.
So not super segmented. You weren't listening to exclusively Christian music or exclusively Christian entertainment.
No,
you had some secular influencers. Okay,
yeah. So, and I feel like the church that we were at for a couple of years, it was pretty similar, full of people that were like that were just like, yeah, we're in church, and then we're gonna go to watch the Bears game afterwards. So,
and whenabouts was this?
So that would have been through. Let me do some math here, like 95, 96, somewhere in there, and then I think that's when the entire family was going, and then took a break as we were kind of moving, didn't really get settled for a couple of years, and then picked back up in middle school, but I don't want to jump too far ahead there.
Sure. Okay, so kind of, moderately Christian, participating, not fully immersed, so to speak, in every aspect of every day, but, it was part of your routine.
Yeah.
So just growing up in that context where it wasn't, constant, what did your faith look like during that time?
I mean, again, it was just kind of something that was there. I think at that age, I think it started to get more, interesting as we moved into middle school and high school and that sort of stuff versus, at that period, because that becomes more like trying to actually develop my own sense of what that means versus just kind of tag along with family as another part of a family activity.
Mm-hmm. So when did it really kind of become something that you yourself wanted to do on your own during that late middle school, high school age?
Yeah, so that it was like sixth grade. We'd moved out. My family moved back out to Arizona, and my sister started going to my older sister started going to a Presbyterian church there, and I started tagging along with her. And so I think that's when it started becoming a more of a choice, and we ended up there. That was kind of like the cool kid church. My friend was the friend. My sister was friends with all the cool kids, but yeah, we were going. I went there for about 3 years, and that's where a lot of like my interest in like the CCM type music came from. MXPX, OC Supertones, Five Iron Frenzy, that all Christian alternative stuff there picked up during those years, and yeah, so I started tagging along with my sister, and then just kind of kept going there for a few years. And also, while I was doing that, I was also one of two non-LDS people in an LDS Boy Scout troop. So I actually think I spent more time at an LDS Mormon church than I did actually at the Presbyterian church.
Wait, all right. record scratch. Back it up here. Like, I thought Mormons didn't allow non-Mormons to be in their congregations. Was
So
this
the
like
Boy
a
Scout
progressive?
troop. Yeah,
Okay.
this was a Boy Scout troop separate, and so I went on like I don't know Tuesdays, something like that, Monday or Tuesdays during the week, and then we go camping at least one weekend, if not multiple weekends in a month. But yeah, one of them, two non-LDS at that. But I probably spent more time like in that culture than I did at the Presbyterian church, which led to like fun things like again mentioning like earlier being kind of in a moderate Christian environment when like DC Talk came out and whatnot. I've heard from
Uh-huh.
other people where they were like, I don't know if we can listen to this sort of stuff. Didn't have that. I did in the truck on the way to camping trips in the Mormon Boy Scout troop, where I was like wanting to listen to DC Talk and like having to explain context to them at like, I don't know, sixth, seventh, eighth, eighth grade. Having these conversations at that point, like 99, 2000 probably.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, spent a lot of time over at this Boy Scout troop met in the gym of the one of the LDS churches where I grew up. And then I would be at the Presbyterian Church on Wednesday nights for youth group, and so it was quite the fun mix.
No kidding. Like I'm assuming like a friend, an LDS friend, invited you.
Yeah, neighbor. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Plus, where I grew up had a sizable LDS population. I grew up in southern Arizona, so.
Oh yes, yes, yes.
But yeah, so a lot of my group of friends ended up being part of that Boy Scout troop and whatnot. And like I said,
Mm-hmm.
I spent probably 2 or 3 days out of every week hanging out in that context, and then going to Presbyterian
Mm-hmm.
youth group where we listened to MXPX and Five Iron Frenzy and OC Supertones.
Have you met my friend Caleb, who likes
Yes,
these bands?
yes. Right, yes. I think that's one of the first things we bonded over was Five Iron Frenzy and OC Supertones in the context of CCM Twitter.
Yeah, of course.
What I think is funny is that you've started to introduce so many of guests as like, hey, here's another person that Caleb met talking about music. Same old story. Like that story is becoming very rote on our podcast of like, hey, here's somebody who might be interesting because Caleb met them talking about music. It's like the story of our podcasting existence is like, hey, we got these core people that we know, and then these random people that Caleb knows, and we're just mashing these two groups together and seeing what we get. And I think it's pretty hilarious.
Well, you're way more popular than me, so you need to bring the people. And
we're in trouble if I'm the popular one. Let's be
know,
real clear.
This podcast, if any advertisers listening is like, maybe I'll advertise on this podcast, don't. We're in trouble. It's a sinking ship. But no, we must have said something to upset the Five Oaks people because Five Oaks people don't reach out to us anymore, so we just branched out. But I did tell my wife today. She's like, "Who are you talking to?" I'm like, "Oh, another one of Caleb's music friends." She's like, "Oh, right." So, it's good context for connection though, because it was a very unique moment in time.
Yeah.
That we all got to
Yeah,
got to enjoy.
100%, yeah.
I think that is the amazing thing is so many people have that context. And it's like, I say it so often, like, I swear we thought we had this super unique experience. And yeah, it was, but it wasn't as unique as we thought. And I think that's still the pretty amazing thing about so much of these weird connections. It's like, oh, you did this too, even though you didn't live in Woodbury, Minnesota? Oh, okay. That's interesting. So...
Now, AJ, did your LDS friends, were they like, yeah, DC Talk, I'm in? And did it like spread as a contagion throughout the Boy Scout troop?
Not specifically DC Talk, but I think some of the others did that were maybe less controversial, like OC Supertones. Like, what could you find that's controversial about them in that space, like in that sort of space? But yeah, it was like this weird thing where I was being introduced by my sister and her friends at the church to this alternative music, and then I was also like, and my LDS friends, here you go, here's stuff that but like I was hardcore into that music at the time, because I even like, I think my sister may have done this like for me because my handwriting's terrible, but put like MXPX and FIF and like on my backpack and stuff like that and like a white marker. So, and I like turned a black backpack into like white and black checkers, like ska checkers and stuff like that on my sleeves at that time. But yeah, I think I was like the resident DJ / like music introduced to that group.
I'll get off the LDS thing after. I'm just fascinated that we have this combination, which we have not had before. But also too, like, real quick on the music thing.
Yeah.
I thought exclusively because during that time you think your own world is the entire world. I thought it was only like evangelicals listen to stuff. Nope, Presbyterians,
Yeah.
different denominations were just kind of into it.
Yeah,
So
I mean, I remember getting DC Talk and Jars of Clay CDs like at the record store in the mall with them being like presented as like the singles to listen to with the headphones. Like
hmm
I remember that time period, and then yeah, the alternative stuff I think spread from there.
hmm
Beyond that, and it may have just been like overlapping circles that then just handed things off again, like the Venn diagram of evangelicals to Presbyterians, and then the Presbyterian circle overlapped with the Mormon one, and I'm introducing MXPX and OC Supertones and whatnot to that
yeah.
crowd too.
The place card for this podcast will be that Venn diagram we create, but
There
Just
you go.
takes up the whole
whole
logo.
thing. It's right.
Before we move on, I did check the records. This is our first reference to Mormonism as I
Yes.
participated in Mormonism in some way. So we've entered a new realm. Every week we find something new. It's pretty amazing.
Did anyone during that time, like in your family on the Presbyterian side, they were like, "Watch out for those Mormons! Like they're going to want you to, go door to door." Was there any conflict during that time?
Conflict? No, because I think they saw the context of what it was of Boy Scouts, and then
Sure.
also me at that time, like I was pretty much like, yeah, life's a buffet. You try stuff, right? Like, you don't get necessarily hooked into anything, but you just kind of hang out. I mean, my group of friends was even more diverse and weird. Like, once we start getting into high school, it gonna get real weird. Um, but no, there wasn't a ton of conflict in that realm because I think the context of what it was in, of like, yeah, I technically entered walked into a Mormon church multiple times a week, but it was in the context of Boy Scouts. So,
Interesting.
we did have like theological discussions and stuff like that, camping
Right.
trips where I was like, I'm gonna have to present my viewpoint against this unified group, which was fun and didn't phase me at all, if that gives context on who I was at that time, where I'm like, cool, you guys call it that? I've not heard that term before. That's interesting.
So to kind of land this part of the story back to, which I'm fascinated with,
Good
back
luck.
to
Good
kind
luck.
of, yeah, I know the course of the conversation. Like we've talked plenty, Caleb, about apologetics being a thing, and I don't quite think during that time there was a lot of like Mormons are not Christians kind of conversation kind of
Ooh,
thing.
I think
But
there was.
There was.
really, while we were in
Yeah.
youth group, okay,
Yeah, I
so
remember we had discussion on cults, and
okay,
Mormonism was definitely labeled as a
okay.
cult.
Interesting. So, like, in my viewpoint, like, if I'm going to youth group in the 90s and my parents or my youth pastor's like, and you go to this Mormon boy, they're going to try and arm me with every single reason that they're wrong to kind of push this us versus them. Like, if you go there, AJ, just be prepared for this and fight for this. But it sounds like that kind of wasn't part of the
No,
vibe.
I don't think anybody was worried about me. I think maybe that says something more about me back then, of like just not gonna buy pretty much what anybody was selling on anything. So kind of did my own
Interesting.
thing. So, but
Interesting.
yeah.
Well, for your youth group, whether it was the Boy Scouts or Mormon Boy Scouts or your Presbyterian youth group, like, what are your most vivid memories or teachings that you still remember or hold on to as important for you during that time?
So I think in either of those contexts, like the importance of community, right? Just like doing fun stuff like the Presbyterian youth group, we go putt putt and laser tag and all that sort of fun, stuff like that. And Mormons, the Mormon Boy Scout troop would be camping and hiking and community service stuff a lot. Again, Boy Scouts in general just kind of do those sort of things. And so I think it's kind of the importance of community, the importance of like service to others. And also, the context of Boy Scouts, like the, I think, benefit of to a group of people, like getting out into the woods,
Yeah,
sitting around a fire and having a conversation about life.
yeah, yeah. Is that something that to draw maybe a few hints of where we're going? Is
Yeah.
that something you still like to do right today?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big outdoors person. I mean, even, the youth group that went to at the Presbyterian Church, we did like week long like camps or long weekend camps up on like what would be like the summer camps. I did summer camp when
hmm
I was younger, I think once, but for the most part, stuff like that was long weekends, maybe spring or fall break, because we got fall break out in Arizona. Don't know if you guys got that too. But yeah, that's something I'd still very much do and very much like. If I can get a group of friends together sitting around a fire, I mean, I've got a fire
hmm
pit in the front of my front porch of my house, like one of the smokeless fire pits.
Nice.
And I'd enjoy sitting around that. Whether it's with my, kids and or my wife or family, whoever. Again, it's a very like communal space where
Hmm.
it's kind of, I don't know if it's because it's something I did a lot of like, yeah, this is where we have chats.
Hmm.
Yeah. Your youth group, were they camping? Was it like when you say summer camp, was it because we've heard a couple different experiences. I think Scott and my experience was always like you went to a church camp where it was cabins and stuff. But then we've heard other people were like, no, 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 we were in tents and it was like roughing it a little bit.
See, Presbyterian youth group can't like cabins. Mormon
Okay.
Boy Scouts, it's roughing it.
So you got to see both of it. That's interesting.
Yeah, yes, 100%.
Okay.
So.
Sorry.
No, I was gonna tell AJ you're invited to come up with me and let's go on a Boundary Waters trip because my son and I like to every summer canoe up into the wilderness in northern Minnesota.
Nice.
It's one of the most beautiful places on earth. No boats,
Nice.
and the campfires at night are kind of the reward for all the work you do throughout the
Exactly.
day.
100%.
Not only is it just chill and it's beautiful outside, but then all the conversations that happen around them are awesome.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's cool. You got that as a kid, and not
Yeah.
everybody gets to have that opportunity. So,
Hmm.
how about after high school? Were you involved at all? Did you come back, or was it just you checked out when you were done?
So, in my freshman year, I actually switched from going to the Presbyterian church to going to a couple of my friends that were outside of that like group of LDS kids that I had friends with, but they went to a different church, and I think it started one time when I was just like crashing over at one of their houses, like on because back in the day in like '90s and early 2000s, you actually said like sleepovers, or
Oh
I'd
yeah,
be hanging out with your friends, you'd be like, you know what? Hey mom, I stay over here.
yeah.
And so I think one time I did that on like a Saturday night. Next day they were going to church. I was like, oh, guess I'm going to church with you guys today. And I liked it. And so I switched to going to church with them my freshman year of high school and like got really involved there.
Oh,
It was also a much smaller youth group. And really liked that church. It was also super convenient for me to like walk to on my own. And I think it also like a little bit of like, little sibling syndrome of like, oh, I've got my own space. I'm not here as somebody's younger
mm,
brother. I am
mm,
here as my own
mm,
person with these friends of mine. But like, there was maybe like 10 people that went to that. And, me and two of my friends made up 30% of that youth group. And
whoa.
so we did, the lock-in stuff there and whatnot. Kind of made it our own community too. And again, I got to be like the kind of the cool guy and bringing in like the alternative rock music to that space because I think it would be more like Audio Adrenaline Newsboys, that sort of level. And I got to be like, have you heard of MXPX?
Please
And
hear
so
me out.
right, and so I was in that space for my freshman year of high school, and like I said, really enjoyed that space. Got to have the fun debate there, and I vividly remember this with our youth pastor of do slushies count as food? Because we were doing like fasting for to raise money for a charity thing where you wouldn't eat for like 24 hours and they feed like do a lock-in. And like my dad's place was like right by there, and so I went to like 7-Eleven before entering into the church. I was like, come up with the Slurpee, and the youth pastor's like, "Can't, that's food." I was like, "That's not food. It's a Slurpee." He's like, "It's got sugar in it. Sugar has calories. The whole point of this is not calories." So I had to have a debate over whether a Slurpee counted as food and why. Is what I remember at that time. But yeah, I went there freshman year, and then both of those friends that went actually moved away.
Mm,
And just the timing of that, I stopped going because my friends weren't there. I probably could have kept going, but it's just like less fun.
mm-hmm.
And I also switched high schools after freshman year as well. And so like, I completely started over sophomore year of high school.
Mm.
So I stopped going there regularly, but to get even weirder, with the LDS Boy Scout troop, I'm going
Oh,
to
they're
introduce
back.
another one that you probably
All
haven't
right.
heard. You ready for this?
I
I
know I'm
start
not.
in sophomore/junior year because I skipped a year of high school. I went to Jehovah's Witness because I was friends with Jehovah's Witnesses.
What?
Yeah, I went. Yes, welcome to my world, my man. Went there for like I don't know a month, maybe. And I was
Okay.
like, yeah, this is too different for me. No, like again, no offense to them. All like, hey, you do you.
Yeah.
But I got to check that one off. I mean, I've probably been at that point between the various ones I went to, like moving around rural areas to that. I don't know. I would guess something like 8 to 10 denominations of churches.
Wow.
And then after that, I made other friends at the school, and one of them invited me. I think this would be senior year, and I just started going to youth, like only youth group on Wednesday. Like this is something I think that's come up in here of like people that didn't go to church on Sundays, like they
Mm.
would go to maybe youth group. And youth group would be fun. Again, like I didn't have to introduce them to the music. The music was already there. They had like a
Mm-hmm.
two or three member like band in the youth group that was also people in it. They had basketball gyms. So we go shoot hoops, and then all right, go up there, they play some songs, and we're gonna have a nice little conversation. And did that. And I think complete context that I started going to that one actually because of a girl.
Mm.
And one Sunday she's like, you should come to actual church. I'd been going for about 6 months there.
Mm.
And I was like, I don't have a ride. She's like, well, I'll pick you up. I was like, oh man, I don't have an excuse anymore. I guess I'm going. And so I go, and service is service, and then folks start speaking in tongues, which I was not told ahead of time
Dude.
nor warned about, and had no sign of for 6 months. And that was kind of a surprise to me. And so afterwards, she was like, "So how'd you like it?" I was like, "That scared me. Like that startled me because I just had no context. Maybe if somebody
Yeah.
had warned me." And I didn't go back there. So that's how I was accidentally like Pentecostal for like 6 months in my senior year of high school. But that was like the last time I went to church in that context until like my mid 20s. But
Interesting.
yes, so I floated around quite a bit at different types of youth groups and different contexts. Which makes for neat stories like that, where I get to say I was accidentally Pentecostal and I was also a Mormon Boy Scout for 3 years.
No kidding. All right. You've had experiences with all these different denominations. Now, Caleb, get out the thing. We're going to do a tier list. We're going to list them all, S tier, all the way down, whatever it is. No, just kidding.
Talk about going straight controversial. We're just gonna
Yeah,
we're just gonna go
yeah,
straight
yeah.
tier listing denominations. The youth group podcast is taking an odd turn.
Yep, and yeah, we got to get on YouTube, I suppose, so people can watch. But it's pretty eclectic, dude. Like, I can see doing like evangelical combined with Lutheran. Like, my parents kept going to Lutheran church a little bit while I was doing my own thing. But to go for those are some pretty big differences.
Yeah, and I think the funnier fact is like I didn't like walk into an evangelical like Baptist church until I was in my like 20s
Really?
in my life. And so like that was my first introduction to it. It was like I got to bypass a lot of that space during this like 90s, early
Mm,
2000s and not enter that space until I was like more formed. I'm not gonna use the word fully formed.
mm-hmm.
So that's an interesting thing where you had people on here that talked about growing up in that space, and I was like, I got dropped into it at like 23 would be my
Sure.
guess.
With a lot more experience
Yeah,
and like not to use it negatively, but a lot more worldly
yeah,
experience
yeah,
that influences that evangelical mindset. So,
yeah.
what, just out of curiosity, like what made you go to a evangelical or Baptist church a few years after you graduated?
So I was actually reading Through Painted Deserts by Donald Miller,
Yep.
and work, I think. There, yeah, I think that was it, right? And one of my coworkers came up to me. I was like, "Oh, you're reading that? Do you go to church anywhere?" And I said, "No." And he's like, "Yeah, why don't you come to mine?" And they didn't have it like advertised what it was. It was a coworker I got along with, and so I was like, "Yeah, sure." And then I show up there, and I was like, "Oh, it's an evangelical church. This. Check another one off the list. Let's
That's
do
right.
this." So, so yeah, because I was reading Donald Miller, because I used to read
Sure.
a lot of Donald Miller back in the
Yeah,
day.
I'm
So,
looking at that book on my shelf.
yep,
I
I've
have
got
that
him
one.
over in mine too.
Yeah. So
I've got Batman over here. Oh shoot.
still theologically significant, Caleb. Don't sell yourself short. I don't know how, but we can make that
No,
connection later.
I think we can sell me theologically short. I wanna clarify one thing for the records. When you were going to that youth group with a girl, was it also for a girl? Like you're kind of interested? Okay, that was the
that's
context.
what I mean.
Scott,
That's the kind.
I can't. I think this is our first. I started going to youth group because of I was interested in a specific girl or boy that we've run into on the show, which I think is kind of amazing that we've made it this far.
Well,
so that's
Checking all
another
sorts
first.
of boxes off.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
The first time that someone's admitted it,
That true. He's just the only honest one. All the rest of you were liars.
Yeah, come back on and let us convict you about your lies.
There you go.
To check all those boxes before you were 30 is
Yeah,
pretty unique, dude. So interesting. Well, I mean, overall, it's kind of hard to wrap the youth experience into one question, but because you had so many different experiences, what did that eclectic experience of church and youth group, like, what did you just love about it?
I mean, I think it gave me a decent amount of insight and understanding and like tolerance for lots of different views because, there's so many arguments in that space across those. And there I was just kind of like floating between all of them.
Mm,
Um, and I'm sure they're pretty big arguments, stuff like that. I don't mean to downplay those, but I was just like, yeah, it's the same.
mm-hmm.
Going to the building, hearing somebody talk about same book. And so I think it gave me a lot of more understanding of like, I don't need to argue with folks over my viewpoint versus theirs. Like,
Mm-hmm.
fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
Have fun.
See, that's interesting I know a lot of people get to that point as adults, but to get to that point as, let's just say, a 20-year-old,
Hmm?
25-year-old is, to me, pretty unique because that's not really, not Christian or not, that's not really our mindset. Like, our mindset as a teenager is like, my thing is the best thing and I want to keep doing it for for a long time. But, you seem pretty much open-minded to the fact that, some places could have it right, could have it wrong. Who cares? We're just kind of maybe going for the same goal.
Yeah.
I'm in.
Don't get me wrong. I was still a teenager in many other ways. Like, thankfully, this is not my politics as a teenager podcast because that might have gotten more interesting. But on this one particular topic, I kind of did shrug my shoulders and kind of like, cool. You guys do it that way. These
Sure.
people over there do it this way. Those people over there do it that way.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's
Interesting.
fine.
Interesting. Well, comparatively then, how does your faith look different now to what it was like back then?
So I think when I was younger, again, weirdly, as like a teenager, you're pretty certain about a lot of stuff, right? People have talked on this show before about like how certain they were and how that led to things. And like I said, I had that in other places. I wasn't certain as a teenager, and I was like uncomfortable with that. I think that's why I left a lot of the space is like I didn't know for sure, and it felt fake to me that I was going to these spaces and like calling myself, a Christian and whatnot when I did have like doubt. Especially in the context of that time, right, where there's a lot of public certainty
Mm,
being expressed by the faith. It kind of made you feel like, well, if I don't think like that, I can't go, and I'm like being a fraud here.
mm,
Mm.
And I think, now I'm probably just as uncertain about about things as I was as a kid, but I'm all right with that. Like
mm,
if the building that I went to earlier today to read from a book that we all read from, that talked about kindness and forgiveness and all that ends up being wrong. Oh well, if the the place that I go, the church that I go, which does only recently started going to be clear, does a lot of community outreach and has feeds homeless people and helps people be able to pay for their doing their laundry and stuff like that. Like if that's for nothing in the end, there's a lot worse ways to live than
mm,
trying to look and care for other people. And so if I'm uncertain, but still go and still participate in these things. I think that's all right. And so I think that's a big evolution of mine is like I don't feel like a fraud
mm,
now.
hmm,
Um, when I'm probably just as uncertain about things. Because I'm not focused on that. I'm focused like group of people comes together once or twice a week, maybe more.
mhm,
Sit there and try and do the best they can, learn to become better people, think good thoughts for people when they're down on their luck, when something's happening in their life, maybe offer a helping hand or offering what they can. All right, that's a pretty good way to live.
Mm-hmm.
Who cares if you're not 100% certain on something?
Sure, sure. It's interesting to hear you talk about that transition for you in the context of what you did grow up with. Not a lot of like theological conviction. I'm not saying that in a negative
No,
way.
you're good.
Like,
You're good.
like I'm not, this is not a negative comment towards it, but like
You're fine.
so many people have come on, and Caleb, myself included, like we were taught to have this theological conviction about many, many things. Whereas your experience was just like, you know what? I want this to be part of the people I'm with on a weekly basis. I want it, even though I may not be convicted about some of these major tenets, I still want it to be part of what we're doing and who we are. We can still have a good time doing that. But yeah,
I
not
still do
being
good in the
yeah,
world too.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it's something that I think is a little bit lost on when people are so heavy theologically. It's like what actions are we actually taking because of it outside of ourselves?
Yep.
Was there any sort of, I mean, we talked about Donner Miller. Was there any sort of like teacher, book, event, or even life circumstance that made you be like, yeah, you know what? I'm going to give this a shot again. I want to find a place where I don't feel so much like a fraud.
So, I think the answer for me is my wife and kids. Like I tell my wife often that like the biggest proof that I have that there seems to be something out there that loves me and wants me to be engaged in the world and to care about the world, love the world is her.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I think having, 4 kids and interacting with them also gives some perspective of some of the doubt and questions that I have. Um, as well. And just wanting my kids to have a sense of community and have a group of people that, again, that they see even adults of being like, we're trying, we're trying to be better people. We're trying to have this positive impact on the world. So I think the love that I feel for my wife, the love that I feel for my kids, and the love that I get from them as well. I think we're kind of the biggest thing to me, and sitting there saying, "Oh, I think this is worth. There might be something there, and this is
Mm-hmm.
worth trying to do something, um, you know, something with."
Mm-hmm. Are your kids youth group age, or they're still super young? They're still kind
They're
of your inside,
yeah,
right?
my oldest is 7,
Okay.
so
Okay.
there's like I said, they went to the 2 oldest went to Sunday school today, and
Right.
so but yeah, they're not quite at that age, and I'll be curious what their experience is like if they get to if they want to go to that sort of stuff and they get
Sure.
to that age. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it comes down to my wife and kids, but also like good memories and stuff too. I mean, talking about the church that I went to my freshman year, I remember I ran into the youth pastor there a couple of years after that one time in public. And like I said, I just stopped going after my friends stopped going. And he's like, "How's it going, man?" And the answer was, "Not well, man, not
Mm.
well." And there was no like anger, there's no nothing like this ain't my problem. He was like, office is open, man. Come on by. And so I think
Mm.
that's a pretty powerful lesson there in that instance of that person. Like he could have been like, well, maybe if you kept coming on Sundays, maybe life would be better for you, man. Right? What you might hear from
Honestly,
them of like, well,
honestly,
it's your
yeah,
fault for not going to church. He
yeah,
was just like, yeah, stop by, man. And
yeah.
so I think that was like that's a pretty powerful lesson that I remember when I look backwards on this is that sense of like there's this person that was just like could have maybe been justified and being like, yeah, ain't my
Hmm.
problem.
You're right, right. Or I told you
Uh,
so, kind of thing.
exactly. There was none of
Yeah,
that. And so I think
yeah,
that was a pretty powerful lesson for me.
yeah. I wonder through that, you talking through kind of that community experience and wanting to do good in the world through the community and wanting to build it in a way through, now going, having participating again in a church. Like I'm kind of in some of those similar places as you. Like there's some things that I just don't know about. I'm comfortable like just not knowing about it, but still going. And we were in church this morning as well. But at the same time, I'm like, what other places in our community are they actually are developing that type of gathering for people where they are doing community together? Where people who've listened to the show know that I'm a baseball coach and we do that, and that's great, but it's only for a season. And we had one of the best years last year. Great time with the parents, great time with the players. But that's over. I don't really talk to them anymore. Like,
Hmm.
what other part of society is giving us that continual community that we all kind of want and crave for? I don't know. I mean, church does. I just don't. I can't think of many others off the top of my head.
No, I'd argue civil society organizations are dying as a whole, right? Like things like
Mm.
Lions Club and Elks Lodges and, beyond that. And you're activating some of my work brain here a little bit, but we'll get roll with this, where they give us these sense of belongings to our community. They give us activities to do in the community and groups to get coming together across like backgrounds, class, politics, so on and so forth, right?
Hmm.
Church does that. All of these do. And so we have these like interwoven connections that aren't, I don't know this person only in one space in one context, and they're this other that I don't know. We have like these overlapping identities that allow us to be connected. They also then again spur connections to the local community, trash pickup type stuff, building
Hmm.
this stage or whatever is like a community assignment. Again, you know, food kitchens, turkey dinners at Thanksgiving, gifts at Christmas, like these service organizations, and they bind us together and they make these connections. And so when somebody makes some claim about whatever political group or whatever, you get to be there and be like, I know Scott, he's a part of that group. He doesn't think that crazy thing that they said on cable news.
Yeah.
So we're losing those spaces that allow
Mm.
us to have these contexts of connections with other people. We're losing these organizations that do things in the community together, that give spaces for people to go. They give, especially for like teenagers and kids, pay nothing to go
Hmm.
hang out at youth group or whatever. Right.
Yeah.
And we're losing all of those things. And so weirdly, also a massive pandemic happened where people like isolated and broke apart. We're becoming more antisocial as a society.
Mm.
And that has some severe downstream consequences for our society. And so it's not just church. So if somebody's listening to this and they're like, hey, he's only saying, no, I'm not. Like all these cross-cutting civil, like civic society groups, even, baseball, like you just said, and other
Hmm.
sports organizations. And it says that you are coming together, you are working together with people to better your community, better each other, and just to know people. We're losing all of those spaces, and it's having a detrimental effect on us. And we're not being intentional about trying to save those spaces,
Hmm.
or build them back up post COVID.
Hmm.
And we're only going to just continue to see rising social isolation, rising anxiety, all that sort of stuff, because we're not finding these, I don't know, excuses is the best word for it to
Hmm.
come together
Hmm.
with all these different people and share a meal or have a conversation about something in a context that is allows you to know somebody better. I mean, I throw bowling leagues in there as well, and it makes
Sure.
this really easy to other each other. Um,
100%.
and so, yeah, there's a lot of problems with lots of organizations.
Yeah, it's really well said, and it is a unfortunately changing and dying part of the society that sometimes not for everybody, but kind of church can give a
Hmm.
solution to per se. I'm thinking as you were speaking that way, like, okay, doing things apart, it's easier to do things like virtually now. It's more than ever.
Hmm.
And of course, over the pandemic, we had to do things that way. But our church, and not just recently, it was like 2 years ago now. They were like, you know what, that online stuff, we're done with it. Like we're not going to do that anymore because we want you to be here. Pandemic's over, and it was serving people in that space at that time, but also too, there's so much value in like that face to face, person to person interaction that I think some churches do very well and can offer for people who are looking for that. So
Yeah.
that's very well said. Something to kind of always be on the lookout for. Like, am I participating in something that's separating me from people that I should probably maybe get to know a little bit more?
Yep. Find ways to be connected to your community folks, whether it is through a church or I don't know, just start a my community cares kind of thing and
Mm-hmm.
come together if it's not that. So don't let me advocate only for that. But I do think that that was a benefit. And I can point to this and bring up stories like back to the church that we went to when I was a kid. This would have been the church I went to roughly pre-K to like third grade. It was Christmas time. Car went out. We had one car. working class family, teachers
Hmm.
needed to either buy Christmas presents or fix the car. And one of my parents was just kind of lamenting that one time, just confided. And like the next day, at least later that week, one of the people from the church showed up with an envelope full of cash and
Hmm.
said, "Hey, church said, y'all are in hard times right now.
Hmm.
You don't got to pick between Christmas and fixing your car."
Hmm.
And, as a kid, I didn't know that story. And as a kid, I sort of think about like what I would have thought of, or as a parent now, like,
Yeah.
oh man, how do you explain that to your kid? Like the choice that you're about to have to make. And that's what comes to mind when I think about my experience in church as a kid. And it's also something that makes me come back to it of when there's hard times, you come together with people
Hmm.
and church helps facilitate that.
Hmm.
Whether you are hardcore as some of your participants in these conversations have described themselves or not.
Yeah.
When the cards are down, folks are there for you,
Yeah.
and we need more of that. And
Yeah.
so it's an example of real personal connection, a real personal meaning beyond the social connection,
Yeah.
beyond like the societal wide cross-cutting cleavages kind of connection and whatnot. But like
Hmm.
just genuinely, sometimes that's not something that can be addressed in another context than people coming together and being like, oh, we're gonna go help those people that we know and
Right.
care about.
Yep. And there are a lot of churches that are focused not or maybe not their major focus is not being theologically correct. Their major focus is creating that type of
Yep.
community and environment for people so they can experience God that way instead of like believe this, take it home, do things yourself, come back next Sunday and you're good to go. Like
Yeah,
they're
exactly.
trying to help other people, whether it's congregants or people coming in, experience God in the aspect of you will be cared for. We'll at least we'll try our best to care for you.
Yep. No, 100%. And so
Mm.
I think that is a lasting legacy of attending a youth group in
Yeah,
the 90s for me.
very good. Well, not to get like too much of a right turn, but it's just
Just do it.
is there anything that you look back on any of those groups that you were part of and just kind of struggle with? You're like, I don't know if we should have done that or
This is real
yeah.
easy.
Okay, great.
In the Boy Scout troop that I was in, we hiked to the bottom of the Grand Canyon and back up in one day.
Oof.
They advise you not do that for like medical safety, life purposes, and just bunch of I think this was freshman year of high school, so like the last year that I was a part of it. Just bunch of like 14-year-old boys down to the bottom of the Grand Canyon and back out
Yeah,
in
that's
one day. We were there before the sun went up, and we got off the trail as the sun was going down. This was like a summer day in northern Arizona.
yeah.
Holy cow.
Was there a
Safety wise,
was there
that's not the best call that's ever been made by an adult in my life that allowed us to do that one.
Did the adult participate in the hike as well,
Yeah,
or
are
did
they
they
like
just kind of
Yeah, that's
send
the
you off
thing.
like,
They
see
did.
ya?
Oh no,
okay?
no, they were in it with us. Like
Okay.
that's one thing again. Like I'll point to. Like we did some crazy hikes and things that even now as an adult, I'm like, I ain't pushing a 13-year-old to do that. But they were right there with us and finding ways to motivate us. I mean, I remember one hike that the like one of the adults was like, "Look, you're tired, feet are sore. We're on our way out of hiking. I think it was like 13 miles in, so 13 miles out. If you just shut up and do this, when we hit the gas station on the way out, it's on me. Whatever you want is on
Yeah.
me." So, hey, that got teenager me to be like, all right, let's do this.
Yikes, a marathon hike. Wow. Wow. Well, yeah, I was imagining like the youth leader standing at the top of the trail, on top of the rim, being like tapping his watch, be like, "Be back by sundown, kids."
Yeah, survive if you can. No.
Yeah, yeah. Make sure, watch out. Buddy up. Make sure your buddy
And there
gets
was like
back.
no sense of like what we did was nuts. There was
Uh
no
huh.
sense of like, hey, by the way, that was impressive that you did that. They were like, yeah, good on you for doing that.
We'll
Like,
do it tomorrow.
yeah, exactly. Like, okay. Because like we got to the bottom and there's like rivers and stuff like that, and
Yeah.
we're jumping in the water and we're swimming and all that sort of stuff. There's no sense of like, and now you guys need to go back up,
Yeah.
and we need to do that before the sun goes down.
Yep.
Like especially as you starts cooling off, rattlesnakes start coming out. Like I remember us jumping over a sleeping rattlesnake on our way back up.
Oh my
So
gosh.
just again, that probably would be the context. Like I don't have any of like the weird, wacky, like even from like youth group specifically type things where it's like, no, nobody did that gross, weird peanut butter thing that you guys have
Yeah.
talked about. Like at
Good.
most, like we put like different flavoring like on ice cream or types of ice cream together and mixed it up and then ate it in a lock-in. Like I don't know. Like what are you weird people doing involving peanut butter and like trying to trick each other into almost kissing or something like that? Like I
Yeah.
don't have any of that. Like
Yeah.
I don't know,
Well,
trying to find the weirdest place to try and hide in the church so you can win sardines. Like
yeah.
that's about as far as mine got.
Well, you know what? That's not a bad thing because clearly a lot of youth groups were like, how far can we like ask the question like, would this kill a person? Maybe, but is it worth it? Yes. Like that's there were a lot of things where they tried to be sensational, obviously.
Yeah, and mine didn't do any of that in any of the places that I went, except for, Boy Scouts apparently making us do like a death march and then being like, no big deal, right, guys?
Sure. Yep.
I like how you described eating ice cream. That was the outrageous thing. Two toppings. We got two.
Settle down.
Again, arguing whether Slurpees are food or not.
That's what I was going to say.
That's
That's
right.
really where it
That's
all
right.
ended up. Is there was a lot of theological food arguments.
Yeah.
And yeah, I didn't even throw a fit about that one. I was like, I guess Slurpees count as food. So to have somebody be able to like argue with a teenager and not activate the teenager like digging their heels in and like, I'm gonna win this fight. Slurpees are. I was like, I didn't think about that. That's cool, man. Slurpee counts as food. I don't get a Slurpee. All
You're
right.
right. You're right,
I have a
sir.
fasting story about food as well. So in college I did a 40-day fast, and just because I felt like the Lord was calling me to do it. So I did a 40-day fast. A couple years later, I was in China, and two people I was working with were also doing a 40-day fast. And I remember like, because I eventually saw a doctor, because like my parents were like, my parents are Christian. They were like, that's fine, but can you go at least talk to a doctor? So I went and talked to like the campus doctor, and he's like, yeah, that's good. He's like, you're still playing basketball every week and floor hockey intramural. Can you at least like have a glass of milk every other day? I just want you to have that protein. And he's like, I'm just a little concerned. He's like, but otherwise, yeah, you should be fine. You're going to be fine doing it. And I remember telling somebody later that I had milk, and they're like, oh, so you didn't do a 40-day fast. And I
Oh
was like,
man, no.
oh, so, and she was so adamant about it. Like she was like, no,
Yikes.
you did not do a 40-day fast. And I was like, okay, I guess I did a 20-day fast and then a bunch of 3-day fasts or something like that. But it was just, she was so upset about it. So at least I can understand the Slurpee argument, I guess. And, but the milk is definitely a no-no from what I've heard.
Way to go, Caleb.
Yeah, I ruined it all.
Yeah, you don't love Jesus very much.
Sorry, really random fasting story.
Well, AJ, I'll ask you this question, which is my favorite. What would your current self say to your youth group self, and vice versa?
Oh man. I think me looking back, kind of to the point that I made previously, is like, get all right with uncertainty, man. It's all
Mm.
right. I'd also tell them like, depending on the age, like you survived a lot of stuff, tough years.
Mm.
Kudos to you, man. Maybe go talk to somebody sooner rather than later. And then looking back, I'd also tell them, there's a band that's going to be forming in a couple of years called Gaslight Anthem. When people tell you you gotta like them, listen to them, you gotta really like them when you finally get around to listening to them.
Nice.
But I think the reverse, right, of like 18-year-old me to what am I now? Almost 38, so 20 years. There we go.
Hmm.
Um, would be in awe, man. Like, I've got a wife, I've got 4 kids. My kids run and jump into my arms when they see me. Like, I have a big house in a small town. I really wanted a truck when I was a kid. I got an F-150. Like, I've published 2 books. Like, I have a job that allows me to be creative and think about difficult and big questions in the world. Not as often as I'd like, but a lot of the time. And so I think like 18-year-old me would be like, man, we made it. And
Mm.
I'd say, yes, we did. I don't know if I recognize that every single day, but I think 18-year-old me would be real happy with where I'm at.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Congrats on,
Yeah.
on fulfilling your 18-year-old dreams.
Yeah,
of the
hey, I
lady
published a
talk.
book and got a truck. Hey,
Yeah.
also I have a wife that loves me and kids that love me.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
there's that too.
Far more valuable thing.
My 18-year-old self feels very ashamed.
I thought my house would be bigger.
I no do no books, barely read.
I will maybe stay on that music topic again a little bit because we asked this question of another guest recently, and it got some good conversations. Like looking back on that music experience of '90s youth group, and having this favorite band, Gaslight Anthem, assuming up there on your favorite list. How did that Christian music experience kind of influence how you listen to music now, or influence your theology now?
I think that's actually hugely important. Maybe not so much the like 90s CCM stuff as much, but like the 2000s like tooth and nail like
Mm,
indie Christian stuff. So like Copeland,
mm,
May, Lydia, like I that getting into that music, I think Love Drug would fall in there as well. Like in that like 2005-ish range through like undergrad stuff for me. It was like this weird, I think the music came first, and then I started reading like Donald Miller and Rob Bell. And so that because you see yourself like as a kid, I was very much like a punk rock kid, right? So like of
mm,
course MXPX stuff like that's gonna speak to me. By the time I hit that timeline, I was like this very like introspective kid, and so like seeing that represented in the Christian space was super neat to
mm,
me, and like I was like, oh, it's not all bombast and
mm,
not all loud screaming metal and stuff like that. There's room for introspection. There is room for thoughtfulness. And so yeah, I think that music actually is what like sort of got me to open that door again.
mm,
And then like I said, found Donald Miller, and I think it was actually through music. I guess Switchfoot maybe. I found like To Write Love on Her Arms, and To
mm-hmm,
Write Love on Her Arms, like the original founder used to quote Blue Like Jazz
mm-hmm,
quite a bit, and that's how I think I found Blue Like Jazz. So I think
mm,
genuinely it is the music, and then Blue Like Jazz led to other Donald Miller, other Rob Bell, more in my bookshelves that are over my shoulder that I think did keep me around, even if it was on my own and not necessarily going to church a ton.
mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think music is huge. I think the 90s one is like the fun era, and then the like 2000s, mid 2000s is like the maturing introspective era.
For sure.
Hmm.
Caleb, disagree or agree?
Now,
No,
don't get me wrong, like Five Iron Frenzy, of course, has lots of really
They
thoughtful,
yeah, they span generations.
right,
It's
exactly.
yeah.
So,
I do think it's really interesting because we've said it 100 times, so I'm totally repeating myself. But like you and I, Scott, are kind of out by 2004, 2005.
Yeah.
Like it's not our scene
Yep.
anymore, and it's passed on to because I'll say yeah, AJ, you're about what 8 years behind me, 7 years behind me, and like
mhm.
so yeah, it is a different era. But it is always cool. It's why I've started to cover bands like May and Copeland on my other show because I
Mhm.
like hearing about what people have to say about those bands because I think what the Prayer Chain and Poor Lou was for me,
Mhm.
that's what those bands are for other people, and it's different, and I totally am okay with it. And so like
Yeah.
the scene did mature and change, and maybe I don't know if mature is the right word. It changed, and there was a change that happened, and so yeah, I think it is cool to kind of hear about that legacy, and that's I think what is also become really cool is that I think a lot more of us have started to understand that legacy where like I don't think any of those Christian bands were good about it. Like they were all too busy pointing at even though they all would have laughed at the sign that says I sound like this band, they all were doing it because they would always talk about their contemporaries and not their forefathers. And I think a lot of us have started to be like, no, 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 this is good. I want to talk about my forefathers of Christian music and why they influenced me, even if I've transitioned to the Gaslight Anthem or Jeff Rosenstock or other non-Christian things. There's still a forefatherness of those Christian bands. So I think that's cool.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. That just so I'm clear, Gaslight Anthem is that Brian Fallon guy, right? Who
Yes,
Caleb, you told me about his Christmas album, which I
which is
listened to this past
fantastic.
Christmas. It was excellent.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm always really compelled by those situations where I would never have guessed. Nobody's going to assume that guy is a Christian or has some sort of faith component to him. I would guess that making a Christmas album means it means something to him. And then, just kind of letting that flow through what his art and his work, that can still
Yeah.
move people and really draw people closer to God.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean, especially because he wrote like an Advent album. I would call that
yeah.
an ad. Like Caleb and I have had this conversation before. That's not so much like poppy Christmas songs that anybody might do.
Yes, thank
He
you.
writes
Yeah.
a very introspective album that, like I said, it is an Advent one. It's a time of like looking inside as well as you're kind of preparing for the Christmas season. And he recorded it by himself in a church, if I remember
Yeah.
correctly, in Jersey. And so like that is a very different album that again you might not suspect when you listen to Gaslight Anthem's music,
Hmm.
but he also points out he's like, I'm one of four people in this band.
Yeah.
And I want to
Hmm.
say he said one of the members is Jewish and one is like I think Buddhist. I might be wrong on that one. And so like he isn't gonna make that explicitly Christian, but he's gonna write a fantastic Advent out. Well, right, I guess is wrong. Yeah, arrange and sing on might be the more accurate way of putting that since it's
Create.
covers.
Yeah.
A fantastic, holiday album.
Yeah. And AJ's joining me on my other. It'll probably be out by now, but AJ joined me to talk about one of Brian Fallon's album, and like, it's one of his solo albums. And yes, it's not a Christian album, but there's elements of it.
So
Like he
much.
has
Yep.
religious, and like I straight up cried on the podcast, like
Yeah, yeah,
talking
no,
about
it was one
talking
of my
about the
favorite
album.
favorite
Yeah.
music conversations I've ever had.
I mean, and that is what that Christian music of our youth. I think there's an emotional connection to it. Then I have then transferred over to all music. I want to have that emotional connection. I may not always, and sometimes MXPX just makes me want to throw a house party or something. But
Yeah.
in general, like it is that it's amazing the way that music has unlocked that for me. And I don't know if that would have happened if I was just listening to Poison. And I'd be a much different person if that was my main musical introduction.
I can't imagine a version of Caleb that listens to Poison.
Thank you,
Nice.
AJ.
That guy's gross.
Yeah, he's even worse
Sleazy
than the
Caleb.
real one.
Caleb the Sleaze.
That's right, the creeper.
Caleb the Sleaze. Let's see, can I switch my
Excellent.
Twitter name now?
Well, okay, so kind of to circle back to youth group and to
Circle
kinda,
back. What? There's no way at this point. Good luck.
No, I will.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Let's see him do
I'm
it.
ready.
Let's see him
All
do
right.
it.
So you got this Brian Fallon dude, obviously a super good artist. He's got a band where he might be a Christian and his friends might be Jewish and Buddhist and have all these different experiences similar to your youth group
Yeah.
experience, AJ.
Well done.
Like, thank you. I think that's kind of a cool way to just kind of wrap up, what about youth group in the 90s and 2000s contributes to who you are today.
I think that again, like this, the perspective on it that I got from a fairly young age, kind of going to some of the conversation earlier, like, cool, you think that, and over there they think that. I don't, but that's fun.
Mm-hmm.
Have fun with that one. You want to go to a Gaslight Anthem show?
I do.
Right? Like I'm
do
just
now.
not that worried about things. And I think it comes from that experience that I had. Like going back to again being a kid, even younger, and just being like, well, next closest church is 30 minutes away, so I guess we're Methodist now. Well, we live here. And next town over, when we move again, I guess we're Presbyterian now. Like just not again, it's building, people getting together, trying to become better people, trying to do good for their community. And so I think it gives me that perspective on faith and other people's faith as well, and just kind of being able to interact with people of different ones on like CCM Twitter, but even beyond that to other religions. Some of my best friends are other faiths, like completely. And just being able to go like, oh, that's neat. I didn't know that. Cool. Have fun. Like I've got a friend that like that's Jewish and at Hanukkah like FaceTimes and like lights the candles one night with my kids and like recites the story and all this sort of stuff. And like I've got friends that are Muslim and just being able like, oh, that's neat. I didn't know that. That's
Hmm.
cool. That insert here. So I have a very just live and let live approach, and I think it comes from seeing all those differences growing up
Sure.
and interacting in all those different kind of youth spaces.
I think that's super awesome because I personally believe that even though those people may have a different belief system, you can still find God in there somewhere. You may, maybe you get to the Jehovah's Witness church and you're like, all right, I'll scale that one back. But there's still people something about people trying to seek out God and
Yeah.
in whatever context they are brought up in and
Yep.
whatever context they currently live in.
Yeah.
Caleb, I'm going to wrap in a really early point of this show. Really early on in this show, like a year ago when we were talking to people, one of our first memories was trying to convert the Lutherans. And someone who's responded to us online said, I remember going back to my hometown and trying to convert the Baptists because they weren't doing it right. And that's completely different, vibe that you're giving off, AJ. It's just like, all right, you probably got something going on with God yourself. That's fine. Just do it. Let's create community together and try and do, good for the people around us. So
Yeah.
I think that's great.
Focus on what you got in common, not what you're arguing about.
Right.
Use that then as momentum to do something good in the world.
Right. Exactly. Well, hey, man, thank you for joining us. This has been really awesome. I've been looking forward to this conversation. Did not disappoint. So appreciate your time this afternoon.
Of course. And now you guys get to go check off a bunch of different boxes that you didn't before. So you're welcome.
You know
I'm
what?
updating the archives as we speak.
We may not have to podcast now, Caleb. All the boxes have been checked.
Exactly.
So, yeah. Thanks, AJ. I free up a lot of my time. So,
Thanks for having me on, guys. I appreciate it. Enjoyed this.
yeah. Thanks, man.
Thanks for listening to this episode of I Survived Youth Group in the 90s. We hope you enjoyed it. Once again, we do want to say thanks to AJ for joining us. It was great to talk to AJ. He is one of my favorite internet friends to talk to. He's been on my music show. He's been on my Patreon show. It was great to have him on here to kind of talk through his experience and hear about what he's going on. We mentioned it in the intro. He's got a podcast called Crashing the Political Party where he explores different third-party candidates. Again, I think this is the pitch for it. Let's see how well I can do it. But the vast majority of Americans do say they would be more interested in learning about third parties or having a third party option. And he explores that and he kind of interviews a bunch of different third party candidates and people who've run for office, people who are in office. He's got a hold of a bunch of different things going on. It's worth checking out, especially if you have interest in politics and interest in that kind of discussion. So Crashing the Political Party, it's available on all the standard podcast platforms. He also has 2 books out. One is short stories for people with short attention spans, and that's just a grouping of short stories. He released it in 2024, and then he also released a book called Jesus and Joe Strummer, which is a story about a rock star who has a overdose. Let's see, I'm doing this from memory. He's a rock star who has an overdose, and then has kind of visions of his dead father, Jesus and Joe Strummer, as he kind of puts his life back together in some ways. So a couple books out there by AJ. You can find those on Amazon. I think you can buy them from him. There's a way to do that. If you can just Google those, I think you can find him and buy them from him as well, or buy them from a different store. So there you go. A couple of different things that AJ has going on. This is going to be a long outro with tons of pitches in it. So there you go. You can find us on Twitter at the handle @SurvivedYG. We're not super active, but there is a Twitter handle out there if you want to follow the show. We try and tweet about when new episodes come out. Otherwise, just subscribe, and that's probably the easiest way to follow the podcast on your podcast provider. Just subscribe, follow the podcast, leave a rating or review. That does also help podcasts. Just that's how you spread the word, help the algorithm. We really appreciate it. If you want to be on the show, that's the easiest way to get a hold of us. Probably is isurvivedyouthgroup@gmail.com. You can also try the Twitter handle. I think Scott's a little better at checking at it, but you can also isurvivedyouthgroup@gmail.com. If you want to be on the show, we're always looking for guests. We're looking to expand this conversation. We love hearing people's stories and kind of hearing how that youth group experience has impacted your life. So shoot us an email. We'll try and get back to you. We're working through a list of guests, so be patient with us. If you don't hear back from us right away, or we kind of go back and forth a little, just be patient with us. We'd love to get you on the show. If you enjoy this show, you might also enjoy the other podcast I do. It's a music podcast called the Album Anniversary Podcast. The music at the beginning and the end of this show is the instrumental version of the song Positive Charge by the artist Dread Pirate Roberts. Thanks again, and we'll talk to you soon. All right, something for the outtakes. AJ, have you ever thought of introducing yourself and somebody asks, like, how were you raised? You just be like, yeah, I was raised in the West Branch of American Reformed Presbyterianism. Do you know what that is?
No.
It's the Simpsons Church.
Okay.
And
Again,
as you're describing all these things, I'm like,
correct.
I'm like, it has a little of that feel, which is described as it's meant to represent a broad range of American Protestant traditions. And I was like, dang, this really does sound, I mean, it's not the exact, but pretty hilarious. I was like, man alive, that is pretty good.
I mean, I did live in Springfield, Illinois for a little while, so there we go.
One of my favorite ones is the one where Ned's wife dies, and which sounds horrifying that I just said that sentence. But he meets that girl at the end, and then she's like leaving, and she's like, "Hey, we're going on tour," and she's upset about something, and she's like, "Yeah, we lost our drummer to a Episcopalian ska band," and it's one of those ones where I wish I could get a screen capture of that because I want to print that out and put it up in my office as like we lost our drummer to Episcopalian ska band. Like,
was he accidentally Episcopalian? Or...
I don't know. No, he wasn't like you. Accidentally Episcopalian. But yeah, it's a pretty hilarious line. So there you go. As you were talking, I was like, yeah, the West Branch of American Reformed Presbyterianism. Lutheranism.
Amazing. So. Nice pull.
Awesome. Oh, I'm going to hit stop on record.
I'm ready.
I closed down the West Presbyterian, the Simpsons reference.
I was like, did he make up a name that was like combining all the things? Like half of what AJ did is in that name.
I wish I would have thought of that a half hour earlier. Because it was like right as we were closing down, I was like, oh, dude, what do the Simpsons call their church? Because I think it's made up. And I think it's a mash of all those.
Well, put it in the intro. Let's do it. Bring it back up. Put it in the intro.
Okay,
just as a little teaser.
Oh, man. Simpsons Church Denomination. Western Branch of American Reformed Presbyterianism. Oh, my gosh. It's the stupidest thing in the world. We are in trouble. All right. I don't know how we'll work this in, but we'll find out.
I don't know either. All right.
There's a whole Wikipedia page on it.
Yeah.
Religion in The Simpsons. All right. There you go. We can do an episode on that.
Oh, man. All right.
3, 2, 1.
Greetings and welcome to another episode of I Survived Youth Group.
Gosh.
The look on your face.
I'm trying not to laugh. Why does the greetings make me laugh?
Because it's stupid.
Man.
All right.
Okay.
3, 2, 1. All right. Welcome, everyone. We are joined today by our friend AJ. AJ reached out to us and being a little fan of the show, wanted to jump on. I'm going to start over because that intro sucked. 3, 2, 1. All of that eclectic church youth group going on. Like, how did that... sorry. What did you... 3, 2, 1... Yikes.